Welcome and thank you for joining us for our first virtual workshop for our coastal vulnerability assessment. We will be presenting information about critical findings. Let me introduce the project team. My name is Yolanda Bandi. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Director for the city. With me is also the Environmental Sustainability Environmental Group and our consultants, Environmental Science Associate, Kearns and West, that have worked on the technical assessment. We also want to thank the Santa Monica College for streaming today's workshop at their campus. The main objectives are to unveil and to share technical information of sea level rise projections and findings, and also give you the opportunity to give your feedback for the project. Next slide. Today's goal is to provide you with an overview of the Coastal Vulnerability Assessment Report. This report was developed by our consultants, Environmental Science Associates, Kearns and West. During this presentation, we will take a look at the methodology used to create this report and also share the technical findings. We will have a brief Q&A session which will give you the opportunity to ask questions about the information that was presented. A good portion of the presentation will be going over the findings, and we will take a look at the sea level rise maps. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and we will post it on our city website. Next slide, please. We are using the Zoom meeting platform for this workshop. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and we will be posted on our website. In order to give you a chance to participate, we will be asking you to use the Zoom chat function to set questions during the Q&A portion of the presentation. Please also use the chat for technical assistance. Next slide. Now, we will give you an overview of the findings. Next slide, please. Let's start with background information. Coastal communities nationwide are conducting studies to evaluate the possible effects of sea level rise. Agencies such as the National Ocean Atmospheric Administration and the U.S. Geological Survey and the California Coastal Commission have provided tools to assess the coast exposure to sea level rise. Within the state of California, nearly 52 coastal cities and counties have completed coastal vulnerability assessments to understand the potential impacts that sea level rise might have in their jurisdictions. Today, we can count our city as one of them. Next slide, please. To provide you with background on how the project started, in 2018, our city council directed staff to conduct a coastal vulnerability assessment to analyze Malibu's vulnerabilities and potential impacts of sea level rise. This project requires extensive research in order to formulate the complete report of technical data. In addition, it requires extensive outreach and input from you, the community, which this is one of the reasons why it was delayed during the pandemic. Today, we are happy to resume this project and to hear from you, our community. We would like to bring to your attention that this is just a technical analysis of sea level rise and does not discuss adaptation strategies or economic impacts. This is just the first step that will set the foundations so we can have a conversation in regards of this study. Next slide. I would like now to introduce the technical team that was selected for this critical study. Environmental Science Associate has worked on sea level rise projects with 20 other jurisdictions. Please welcome our coastal engineer and project manager for the project, James Jackson. James Jackson is a registered engineer with the state of California and is a hydrologist. Thank you for joining us, James.
Thank you, Yolanda, for the kind introduction and the opportunity to be a part of this project. I'm going to take a few minutes now to provide an overview of our vulnerability assessment study methods, and we'll get into the technical findings after that. Next slide, please. So our study follows the best practices and available science for sea level rise planning. Sea level rise is projected to increase around the globe, and by the end of this century, there may be as much as 3 to 7 feet of sea level rise that will increase coastal hazards and impact coastal communities such as Malibu. Next slide. Malibu has experienced impacts from coastal hazards over many decades. For example, large waves and run-up during the 1983 El Nino damaged the Paradise Cove Pier, pictured on the top left, as well as many coastal properties, as shown in the top right image. Photos on the bottom illustrate coastal erosion impacts that occurred in spring of 2019 that damaged the Adamson House property and eroded the beach in front of Surfrider Beach Lifeguard Station. Next slide. Existing oceanfront properties are regularly impacted by high tides, as shown as the images on the top, indicating 2012 king tide along Malibu Road, and images showing the 2016 king tide along Broad Beach at the bottom. Next slide. Property owners, the city of Malibu and Los Angeles County have already taken action to reduce the impacts of these coastal hazards. Today, approximately 30% of the Malibu coast is protected by a range of coastal armoring structures, as shown on this map in red. Next slide. Furthermore, beach nourishment has occurred at Las Tunas and Zuma beaches in the 1960s and 70s, and today, temporary berms are regularly built along important structures along Zuma Beach to reduce winter wave run-up impacts, as shown in yellow in the images here. Next slide. This study evaluates 2 future sea level rise scenarios that include 2.5 feet projected to occur in 2050 to 2060 and 6.6 feet projected to occur between 2080 and 2100. These scenarios were selected following the current state guidance on sea level rise planning. The later date assumes greenhouse gas emissions continue at the current rate, and the sooner date assumes more rapid ice sheet loss in Antarctica. I'd like to point out that our project started in 2019, which is why we used the 2018 Ocean Protection Council projections for sea level rise. We understand that updated state guidance from the Ocean Protection Council are anticipated to be coming out soon, and they will likely extend the timelines for these sea level rise amounts that we considered for this study. We worked with the best available science at the time, and these scenarios provide the city with precautionary projections that are appropriate for community-wide planning. We want to emphasize that these are current projections and that sea level rise science continues to evolve. Next slide. For example, in 2022, after our draft report was completed with the city and the project was put on hold, the National Ocean Atmospheric Administration released updated sea level rise guidance, or sea level rise projections around the globe, including for the Santa Monica tide gauge shown on this graph. To compare our sea level rise projections with this latest information, the graph shows that our 2.5 feet sea level rise scenario could be expected to occur between 2070 and 2080, and 6.6 feet could occur around 2100 to 2130. The sea level rise technical report, summarized here, provides a synthesis of the most recent science related to sea level rise and serves as key technical input for the 5th National Climate Assessment that is underway. This technical report is not guidance or design specifications for our project, but it indicates that our study sea level rise projections may occur over a longer timeline than indicated in the most recent Ocean Protection Council guidance from 2018. Next slide. The study evaluates several types of coastal hazards for existing conditions and future sea level rise. These include regular tidal inundation from monthly high tides, long-term shoreline, dune, and bluff erosion, as well as temporary storm flooding and wave run-up impacts. All of these hazards are provided by the USGS Cosmos Hazard Mapping Program. Malibu has previously experienced impacts from coastal hazards, as indicated by these photos, showing shoreline erosion in front of the lifeguard facilities at Surfrider Beach, king tide inundation of coastal properties, and storm wave run-up and coastal flooding impacts, such as during El Nino events. Since Malibu has previously experienced these coastal hazards, the city felt it was pertinent to include this information for the technical study. Next slide. Next, we overlaid the assets with various hazard layers, including the beach and bluff erosion, tidal inundation, coastal storm flooding, and wave run-up, in order to see how the coastal conditions could impact Malibu's assets. The number of exposed assets are tallied for each sea level rise scenario. The purpose of a vulnerability assessment is to determine the maximum extent of potential impacts. So we utilized hazard mapping that assumes no action is taken against preventing coastal hazards. For example, taking action could include building berms or seawalls or other measures that would affect the path of water and the erosion and flooding forces and impacts that might occur. For the purpose of scoring vulnerabilities, we evaluate hazard exposure due to erosion and tidal inundation as a permanent effect, whereas storm flooding and wave run-up are considered a temporary effect. Next slide. The purpose of this study is to understand both the potential increase in coastal hazards with sea level rise, as well as the impacts that these hazards might have on the development, infrastructure, and environment within the city of Malibu. We refer to these features as assets. We mapped the Malibu coastline using several data sources listed here to identify the location of Malibu's assets. We evaluated different asset types that include items like police stations, lifeguard towers, businesses, and residences. At today's meeting, we will go over hazard maps that show the various exposure of these assets. We've also produced a GIS web map that can be viewed by anyone with a computer, and we'll talk about that later as well. Next slide. The vulnerability for each asset category was assigned based on the amount and timing of hazard exposure, the sensitivity of the asset to impacts, or in other words, the level of impairment by hazard exposure, as well as the adaptive capacity of the asset, or in other words, the ability of the asset to change in response to increasing hazards. Understanding these factors helps us to understand what assets are at risk for mid to late century sea level rise. Next slide. Now that I've gone over our study methods, I will now take a few minutes to present an overview of our technical findings and look through some of the hazard maps that we've produced. Next slide. To summarize sea level rise vulnerabilities in Malibu, we'll focus on the city's development, Pacific Coast Highway, and its beaches. Based on results to the technical analysis, we can identify which coastal hazards impact these different assets. Development, including residences and commercial buildings, are exposed to shoreline and bluff erosion, as well as storm wave run-up along the coastline. And additional low-lying areas are subjected to coastal storm flooding and tidal inundation. Pacific Coast Highway is also vulnerable to erosion and coastal storm flooding and wave run-up. Beaches in Malibu are primarily narrow under existing conditions. For example, about 5% of the coast has little to no beach above the high tide line. If sea level rises by 2.5 feet, approximately 40% of the coast could be without a dry beach, and nearly 80% of the coast could be without a dry sand beach with 6.6 feet of sea level rise. Next slide. I'm now going to walk through the 8 map areas that cover the entire length of the city of Malibu's coastline. I'm going to discuss the potential impacts of and exposure of assets for 2.5 and 6.6 feet of sea level rise. And here we're focusing on the built assets. In our technical report, we have a lot more maps that can be viewed that also show existing conditions and also show other asset categories, and that will cover those when reviewing the web map. So next slide, please. To start, we're going to go from west to east, and this is area map 1. So for those attending at Santa Monica College, the maps have been provided in your handout. Map area 1 includes coastal properties with residences along the bluff top or bluff face. These properties are exposed to coastal erosion with 2.5 feet of sea level rise. Next slide. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, additional bluff erosion exposes further amounts of property and structures on the bluff top. Next slide. Map area 2 includes bluff properties as well as waterfront properties along Sea Level Drive and Broad Beach. These are on either side of Lechuza Point. And moving further to the southeast, the shore transitions to Zuma Beach. These coastal properties are exposed to bluff erosion and tidal inundation, as well as coastal storm flooding, while Zuma Beach and the structures and parking areas along this stretch are exposed to coastal storm flooding and shoreline erosion with 2.5 feet of sea level rise. Next slide. With an additional sea level rise up to 6.6 feet, greater areas are exposed to coastal erosion and tidal inundation, while coastal flooding impacts extend further inland along the coast. Next slide. Area 3 includes the southern portion of Zuma Beach, as well as the Zuma Lagoon and Point Dume with its beach below. With 2.5 feet of sea level rise, the beaches are subjected to coastal erosion as well as storm flooding and wave run-up impacts, while bluff top properties are subjected to bluff erosion. Next slide, please. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, shoreline and bluff erosion are projected further, while storm flooding impacts reach further inland along the low-lying beaches. Next slide. Area 4 includes the bluff top properties east of Point Dume, Paradise Cove, and a mix of bluff top and beach level development along East Escondido Beach, Malibu Colony Road, and includes Dan Blocker County Beach, as well as residences at Latigo Beach. This area is exposed to shoreline and bluff erosion with 2.5 feet of sea level rise, which impacts properties as well as Pacific Coast Highway east of Latigo Beach. Next slide. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, projected erosion exposes additional property as well as roads along these oceanfront areas. Next slide. Map Area 5 stretches from Dan Blocker County Beach to the east along Malibu Road. With 2.5 feet of sea level rise, development and portions of PCH are exposed to coastal erosion as well as coastal storm flooding and wave runup. Tidal inundation will increase on these coastal properties. Next slide. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, greater portions of PCH are exposed to erosion as well as the oceanfront properties and Malibu Road itself. Storm flooding and tidal inundation will also increase along these coastal properties. Next slide. Area 6 includes the eastern portion of Malibu Road, as well as Malibu Lagoon and the surrounding commercial areas, the Malibu Pier, and oceanfront businesses and other properties along PCH to the east. With 2.5 feet of sea level rise, oceanfront properties are exposed to increased tidal inundation and coastal storm flooding impacts. And much of the properties west of PCH are subjected to coastal storm flooding. Storm flooding also exposes commercial areas inland of PCH, and low-lying areas that are shown in green may experience additional flooding and or groundwater issues during coastal storm or rain flooding events. Next slide. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, oceanfront properties are shown to be largely impacted by coastal erosion and tidal inundation, and storm flooding reaches greater areas along the coast, including PCH and areas west of Malibu Pier. The majority of the commercial areas adjacent to Malibu Creek and Lagoon are shown to be impacted regularly by tidal inundation and or extreme coastal flooding impacts. Next slide. Area 7 covers oceanfront properties from Carbon Beach, La Costa Beach, and to the east of Dukes. With 2.5 feet of sea level rise, these properties will experience increased tidal inundation, coastal erosion, and coastal storm flooding impacts that reach the Pacific Coast Highway in some locations. Next slide. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, coastal erosion and storm flooding impacts extend further inland to PCH and in many locations. Next slide. Area 8 includes the easternmost portion of Malibu, extending from Big Rock Beach to Topanga Beach at the east end of the city limits. This area is primarily characterized by ocean properties and/or Pacific Coast Highway. With 2.5 feet of sea level rise, these properties are exposed to increased tidal inundation and coastal erosion, as well as storm flooding impacts. Next slide. With 6.6 feet of sea level rise, coastal erosion is projected to expose much of PCH along this area, including the coastal properties seaward of it. Next slide, please. So as part of this study, we've prepared a GIS web map that hosts all of the data that we collected and prepared for this study. And that includes both the asset information showing various infrastructure, property, buildings, etc., as well as the different hazard mapping for coastal erosion, tidal inundation, coastal storm flooding, and wave runoff. This screenshot gives a preview of the web map, which can be accessed through the city's website at the link and QR code on the slide. For those at Santa Monica College, the web map will be available on a computer brought in by city staff. Next slide, please. One may navigate the web map manually by zooming in and out and panning around using the symbols on the top left of the screen, or by searching for a place name or specific address in the search bar, just like you might use another web-based map. Different map layers can be turned on or off with the layer icon at the top upper right-hand corner of the map screen. Next slide. So clicking on a layer group at the top right of the screen pulls down a list of layers that can be turned on and off, as well as expanded to see what symbols are being depicted for the different layers. The images here show some of the sea level rise hazards that can be viewed using the web map. Please note that these hazard layers are projections and that the sea level rise scenarios show what could happen if coastal armoring is not in place and hazards are allowed to progress with sea level rise. Next slide. Additional layers in the GIS map include assets, and we can view these alongside the hazards to see what might be affected by different projected sea level rise scenarios. The critical asset layer includes assets such as fire hydrants, fire stations, and police stations. The recreation layer shows hiking trails and park areas. The transportation layer shows bridges, gas stations, and roads. And the water layer shows assets, including sewer and storm drains. Next slide. Furthermore, the development layer shows assets including parcels, residences and commercial buildings, as well as coastal armoring structures. And the ecology layer shows different habitats throughout the city that include kelp beds, clam habitats, streams, and different wetlands. Next slide. To reiterate, the purpose of this web map is to identify asset types and understand their potential exposure to projected coastal hazards with sea level rise. The web map can be accessed here by this link using the QR code or by navigating to the city website. I will now pass the floor back to Yolanda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. This study sets the foundation for the city's next steps to come for this report. Next slide. We want every member of our community to be able to learn about these findings and to participate. We previously hosted our in-person workshop on Tuesday, and we will be posting a recording of today's presentation on our website very soon. In addition, we will also have our online survey will remain open until November 30th. Please take a minute to complete and provide us with your feedback. We want to hear from you, our community. Again, if you're able to share this information with your neighbors, your friends, or other community members, please do so. We need your help. This workshop is a first step to provide the community with technical information only. Early next year, we plan to host our second phase for this project, specifically to gain your feedback. This will be the time that the city will put aside to listen to you, our community members, and hear your takeaways from today's workshop and from this report. We would like to know how you would like us to move forward. Then we will take your feedback and incorporate it in a final version of the Coastal Vulnerability Assessment Report before presenting it to our city council. Next slide. Now, we will take some time to answer your questions. Please write your questions in the chat and include your email or phone number in your question. If your question is not addressed today, we will contact you and answer it very soon. Solisha Andico, the city's environmental analyst, will be assisting with reading the questions that we receive on our chat.
Hello. If you guys have any questions at this time, we will be happy to answer them. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and our team is here and ready to answer. One of the questions we have received is, where will this presentation be posted? And will it include all of the slides and guides? This presentation is being recorded, and soon we will be able to post it on our website. We will drop the link to the website in the chat for you to copy and paste. As many of you have registered today and included your email, we will also be sending an email with links to the Coastal webpage and presentation, along with a composed frequently asked questions with some of the answers that we'll provide. I think we'll give just another minute for questions. If you do not want to ask your question at this time, I will also have my contact information, phone number, and email available at the final slide so that you can ask your questions confidently by emailing me or contacting me directly.
There's a lot of information that was presented today this afternoon. That's why we wanted to record the presentation and for the community to have the time to read the report. As Solisha Andico mentioned before, this has been recorded. We will put it on our website, but you can also come to City Hall. We will be more than happy to meet with you and go over your questions in person if that's how you like.
And it seems at this time, it appears that we have a question that has come in. Let's see. One of the questions that has come in is wondering about what the next steps are going to be. Right now, at this point, we just wanted to discuss that this is a technical study for us to evaluate the projections of sea level rise. And at this point, we do not have the current next steps in place. What we're looking to do is seek the next steps from the community and see, now that we've presented the technical information and conducted this technical study, we want to talk to the community to see what the next steps that you are interested in. So if you could please include the next steps that you would like to see in the chat, or contact me via email, come into City Hall. We would love to hear the next steps that you as the community are interested in taking. We've received one question via email, and I'm going to direct this question to James. This question asks, are the sea level rise projections based on base flood elevations? James, can you please take this question?
Can you repeat that, Celicia?
Yeah, the question is, are the sea level rise projections based on base flood elevations?
Sea level rise projections are based on ensemble of global climate models and digested by our guidance providers at the state of California. And so the sea level rise projections are just the mean sea level, increases in mean sea level. And so that would have different effects on various processes, including how much tidal inundation might increase, which could be more expected to be more linear with sea level rise, or otherwise you have 1 foot of sea level rise and your high tide is likely going to be 1 foot higher. Base flood elevations are specific to the coast and topography, including the beach and exposure to waves. So base flooding elevations are in the FEMA speak are more of the wave run up heights based on coastal storm flooding impacts. And so there may be an additional increase of wave run up that exceeds the amount of sea level rise. So in some cases, depending on the coastline, a foot of sea level rise might amount to an additional 3 feet or even greater amount of wave run up at a given location. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you, James. Another question that we have received is, what kind of guidance are we seeking from the community? What have other communities done proactively that we can assess? So there have been about over 50 jurisdictions that have conducted their coastal vulnerability assessment, and some have moved over towards being able to prepare and adapt for sea level rise scenarios. There are a few options that I've heard of, or have heard from talking to various environmental groups and stakeholders that other jurisdictions have done. Some may include retreat, and what a retreat option would entail is moving residences, buildings, assets back away from the areas of projected sea level rise. Another option that communities have done is raise their assets. So some locations have put their homes on stilts, have raised the roadways. Other options are more natural. There are areas that have put in living shorelines to help protect the beach from narrowing further. Additional options would be putting a breakwater in the ocean. In a way, it's putting up a wall to deflect wave impacts or additional erosion on the beaches. James, do you have any additional ways that you've heard of other communities proactively assess or adapt?
Those are some great options. Yeah, we coastal armoring, modifying assets, raising homes, raising or otherwise modifying exposed infrastructure and assets, beach nourishment, interventions in the intertidal zones. So there's a number of potential adaptation measures out there.
Thank you. Another question that I have, I will direct to James. This question asks, does this study align with the updated FEMA maps?
So this is a separate process from FEMA mapping, which is produced for the purpose of flood insurance. And so this sea level rise assessment is separate from the FEMA mapping process.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions at this time? Okay, I think at this time we'll move forward. If you have any additional questions, again, my contact information will be on the final slide, so you can reach out to me via email or phone directly. Or you can come into City Hall and ask these additional questions. Thank you. So for the last portion of the workshop, we will discuss how you can provide feedback on the maps that we have gone over today. And we are going to give you an online worksheet where you can provide input about specific geographic areas on the Malibu coastline. If you are attending from Santa Monica College, the comment form and all of the maps have been provided to you. Next slide. To reiterate, there are eight map areas that we have gone over, as shown here. Each area has 3 maps, including one for existing sea level conditions, one for 2.5 feet of sea level rise, and the final one for 6.6 feet of sea level rise, that all show the critical assets. Next slide, please. To access the sea level rise maps for these 8 different geographic areas, please follow the link that's shown on this page, and we are also going to include it in the chat now. Once you click on the link, you're able to pick which of the 8 map areas that you'd like to provide input on. For those attending from Santa Monica College, the maps have been provided in your handout. And we have that link published in the chat, please, for our audience. Thank you. So please feel free to access the link here. And can we move on to the next slide? So once you've selected the specific map area that you're interested in, you'll be taken to this page. At the top is a link to access the sea level rise maps, shown here in red. Please open the maps and answer the questions that are shown on this page. You can either answer the questions just for one map or move on and answer questions for multiple map areas and submit your answers. The more maps that you answer, the more data that we as the city will have. For those attending from Santa Monica College, please answer the questions on your comment form. We will give you some time to view the maps and answer the questions. Please let us know that if you have any technical issues, questions, or comments, you can add them into the chat. This page will remain active after the presentation to give you more time to view the maps and answer any questions as well. So at this point, we are going to have you guys explore the link that we've posted, and please send in the chat if you have any specific questions or comments, and I will continue to address questions here. Can we go to the next slide, please? And just while you guys are browsing, I'm going to leave my contact information here. So if you wish to address any questions via my email or my phone number, that information is here. We'll also have a QR code that'll send you to our home coastal webpage. And on that webpage, you will be able to access the interactive GIS map, our coastal draft reports, and various other resources, including the survey that's going to close on November 30th. So please take this time to explore the link and submit any comments if you have, or submit in the chat if you have any questions.
Please, if you still have any questions, let us know. We are still available. It's not, it's 3:40. So we will stay here to see if anybody wants to ask a question. Take a moment of reviewing the maps. And we appreciate you joining us today.
One of the questions that I have received is, will multiple agencies need to approve any measures? That's going to be a case-by-case scenario depending on what the proposed measure is. But for the most part, I would say typically multiple agencies are involved in reviewing these projects.
The major for next step will be collecting all of your comments. Just reminding everybody this is a draft. So we will need your information so we can compile and bring it back to our city council. This is your project. So we would like to hear what would you like for the community to take on next. Any more questions, Alicia?
No additional questions have come in at this time. I know right now the audience is working on the interactive worksheet. Just to reiterate, this worksheet will continue to remain open after the presentation. The maps will be posted on our website, and you can continue providing your input past this presentation time.
We will make sure this presentation it is also on our city manager update, so it gets distributed and people know more about it, where to find the recorded presentation.
One of the questions that I have received is, will we be using the registration list to email everybody? The answer is yes. If you've signed up for this presentation, you were asked to put in your email address and your information. So we'll be adding you to our email list and sending you all of the updates for this project.
For the second phase of the project, we will make sure that mailers will go out. We will do an extensive outreach again to the newspaper, our radio announcement, our city manager updates, social media, sending you emails and also phone calls. So we really wanna you have your participation for the second phase and get your comments.
We'd also like to reiterate that if you know of any friends, neighbors, family members that were not able to join on this presentation today or during our Tuesday in-person workshop, that they will still be able to view this presentation and all of the information by the recording of this presentation. So we will email you all of the information, and if you could pass it on to your friends, families, and neighbors, that would be excellent. I'm getting requests from members to be added to the email list. If you are not currently on our email list and would like to be added, please feel free to add in the chat your name, your email, and your phone number if you'd like, and we will definitely add you into our list. One of the questions we received is, will future projections include existing coastal armoring? So for this study, we had located where the existing coastal armoring is at, but we did not include it in the projections of future sea level rise. If you do wish to include the existing coastal armoring in the final version of the coastal vulnerability assessment, please let us know.
Since we don't have any more questions, we would like to thank you for your participation. This concludes our presentation. Please remember that you can visit our project's website and access the Coastal Vulnerability Assessment Report there. The interactive GIS webpage and the link is above in the QR code. So please use it. Please remember to let people know about our survey and that this virtual workshop is being recorded. If you are viewing from the Santa Monica College, please provide your questions and comments to the city staff members that are there in the room. In addition, if you have any more questions, please don't forget to reach out to Solisha Andico, our environmental sustainability analyst. Her phone number and email address is on this page. We want to thank you. We want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving and safe holidays. And thank you very much for your time. We look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to meeting on the second phase and finalizing the report. I want to thank James Jackson from Environmental Science Associates and Kearns and West that had helped us with this critical report and findings. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.